Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I want to talk about this news that we got a few days ago. I believe it was on Thursday of last week that we would not be getting another beta for Overwatch 2. John Spector, of course, the former head of the Overwatch League, now the commercial lead and vice president at Blizzard for Overwatch, tweeted out, "Today marks just 2 months until Overwatch 2's launch. We know players are eager to dive in and have seen questions about the possibility of a third public beta. While we continue testing Overwatch 2 daily internally, we're not planning any additional public beta tests. With all the valuable feedback we received from our alpha and 2 public beta tests, we will be focusing our efforts on launching the best game possible on October 4th. So that was it. That was the entire Twitter thread, just 2 pretty simple tweets. But obviously there have been a lot of very noticeable kind of reactions to this, because I think there are definitely questions that a lot of people have about this kind of decision, right? One of the biggest things a lot of people have, one of the gripes people have, is that the Moira changes that were made late in the beta are presumably not going through based on what we've seen with the announcement about the Overwatch League going forward in this next kind of patch they're having. They're having a different look for Moira and Mercy. Presumably they're just basically having the patch that it ended on without the changes that were made to Moira. And I don't know exactly which Mercy changes they're referring to, but we're not going to have Necrotic Orb for Moira. We're going to have a different thing for her in the Overwatch League. But there's been a lot of criticism because people are looking at this and saying, well, you know, this is essentially, you're locking in a pretty static meta for the remainder of the Overwatch League season and other potential problems that I'll talk about here in a second. But in terms of like a static meta, right? Like, what are we getting when we get into the next tournament cycle, right? So the next tournament cycle kicks off this week on Thursday, August 11th, is when the next tournament cycle kicks off. And so then the question that you have to ask is, well, then where are we going to be when the game actually releases, right? Where will we be on October 4th? Where will the game actually be release-wise? So let's talk about where the game will be. So October 4th is, of course, I believe a Tuesday, to be sure. Yes, it is a Tuesday, October 4th. And so that will be happening right in the middle of the Countdown Cup qualifiers. I believe that is the second to last week of the Countdown Cup qualifiers. Maybe the last week, but I think it's the second to last week of the Countdown Cup qualifiers, and then you move into the play-ins, and then eventually the playoff tournament. So that is going to be happening right at the end of the final tournament week, roughly around the end of the final tournament week. So the next 2 tournament cycles presumably will have one meta. They will not have any type of changes to the game as a whole. Now, they may make some changes between them based on things, just kind of making some balance changes, but Junker Queen is going to be the new hero for the second half of the season, and then potentially going into the playoffs, we will have a playoff patch which adds a new hero, which to me is a little bit worrisome. That did happen in 2019 with Sigma getting added, Double Shield becoming the meta going into the playoffs in 2019, and that definitely was something that people were critical of, though I think people aren't as critical of it because the finals ended up being between 2 teams we expected it, being the Shock and the Titans. But you link back to like 2018, there wasn't a new hero, but there was a major meta shift that kind of threw off a lot of things. Puts London in a good position, puts New York in a bad position. 2020, the Shock win, of course, again, but the Dragons get kind of messed up because it becomes a hog meta because it's a major change. So something like that could happen again when, Asa, the next hero, or at least I presume it's Asa, gets added into the game. We might see some potential kind of issues there with meta and the way the game shakes up, because it could be difficult, it could be different. And I think that is always a potential issue where we're going into the playoffs with a new hero. Most likely, I would be surprised if, they don't want the playoffs, the biggest tournament of the year, being played on the patch that presumably, or close to the patch that will be in the game when the game goes live. There's a decent amount of time in between the play-ins or October 4th and the actual start of the playoffs. So I think that we will actually see that new hero live when we get to the playoffs. So what are my thoughts on this, right? It is definitely something that you have to kind of look at and definitely something I'm kind of interested in hearing people's thoughts on it. One of my biggest gripes, and I felt like this was probably going to be likely when they announced there's only going to be 3 new heroes, is that the Overwatch team essentially has shot themselves in the foot, and they can't have another beta. They can't have another beta because if they have another beta, people will be relatively angry if there's nothing different between the next beta and the final game, right? Or if there's not really a noticeable difference between the second and third beta. The only way to make a noticeable difference is you have a different hero and you have a more expanded map pool. Well, I don't think there's that many chances for that to happen. There is a new map we know about. I believe it's the Portugal map. I don't remember what it's called, but that's a map that will get added into the game when the game launches. And we know that Asa will be added into the game with another hero. But they are not going to drop a third beta with those things in them because that means they don't have a new hero to put live when the actual live service drops on October 4th. And that is why they are not going to do another beta. Realistically, that's the reason why. The game is just not in a position for them to be able to roll out another beta with enough new content for people to think that it's a worthwhile beta, and then also have enough new content when the game actually launches on October 4th for that to be a, understandable and logical thing that we get, right? It's really difficult to sit here and say, well, we can put in the new hero in the third beta and then also not have another new hero when the game drops, right? Like, look at Valorant, for example. Valorant's beta was not very long. It was like 2 months, I think. And then there was a very short break between the end of the beta and the launch of the live service. But then when the game dropped, they added Reyna and they added the map that I can't remember the name of off the top of my head because I don't play Valorant that much anymore. But like they added a new agent and they added a new map when the game launched. Boom, cool. Now the game feels different than the beta does. But Overwatch can't really do that because they put themselves in a poor position based on how they actually prepared for this early on in the way that the beta has been done. I don't necessarily disagree with that logic that you can't really do a third beta when you don't have the content to push out a third beta and also push out new content when the game launches. But to me, that is an issue of the game feels like there just isn't that much content, right? It really does make me wonder. I have to ask this question. Like, it seems very obvious that the main focus for the dev team for a while was the PvE side of the game. It feels very, very clear and obvious that they had no intentions really of pushing PvP out anytime recently because they've been working very heavily on PvE. That's the only logical explanation for all of this. And so they only had like 1 or 2 heroes ready, presumably. Obviously, like Sojourn was ready. Sojourn was the first hero that we knew was coming. We knew Sojourn was coming a while ago. So she's, I think, been in a state of pretty much ready for a while. Then they pumped out Junker Queen and pumping out Asa because I think they recognize that they just don't have the content for the PvP side that they wish they would have had for a launch, which is definitely bad, and it is something to criticize the game for. My whole thing is that the way that the game has been handled, PvE better be really, really good. If the PvE mode of Overwatch 2 isn't good, then the Overwatch 2 to me is a flop. You cannot sit here and have pretty lackluster content at the drop of Overwatch 2, and then when PvE rolls out, also have the PvE be pretty lackluster. If the PvE isn't fun, the PvE doesn't feel exciting and good and engaging, then to me you have dropped the ball on what this game is meant to be. Because clearly PvE was where they put a lot of their development time, and they just recently, probably within the past year, if that long, switched to making it where they're focusing on getting PvP out first and putting PvE on the back burner while they get PvP kind of in a state where it's ready to go and they can push out the new maps, a lot of that type of stuff, and expand the team most likely so that the PvE side of things has its own focus while the PvP side, you can focus the entire live service team on Overwatch 2, and you don't have the team basically split between, the bare bones team working on Overwatch 1 live, the team working on Overwatch 2 PvP, and the team working on Overwatch 2 PvE. You can just combine both of those PvP teams, the Overwatch 1 live service and then the Overwatch 2 live service, into one team, so you don't have to focus and worry at all about where you are with Overwatch 2 or Overwatch 1, because that game doesn't matter anymore when Overwatch 2 drops. But it is definitely a concern to me that the content going into this game feels pretty lackluster, and the beta, the third beta, was definitely not something that I was happy to see wasn't going to happen, because I think that the third beta would have been very, very good, though maybe would have cut a little too close to when the actual game would have dropped, because they would have had to drop the third beta, sometime in August, and that's not a lot of time since the end of the previous beta. So, there's always things to be said about it, but that's kind of one of my general kind of thoughts on the way that they've kind of taken this beta. But I'm definitely not too concerned about the drop of the PvP side of the game. I really am concerned about the PvE. Because of the PvP, if they're going to be adding stuff regularly, in 5-6 months, people will forget largely about the kind of state that Overwatch 1 was in and kind of the end of it, as long as the PvP is getting good updates, right? If we're getting new heroes on a regular basis, if the season schedule is good, if the new maps are good, no one's really going to care about the fact that Overwatch 1 was on life support, because they're going to say, you know what, Overwatch 2 is fun, and it's a fun game to play, and it's free to play, and I can't complain too much because the game is getting the development that it needs. But if PvE is bad, people will criticize them and be like, you spent all this time making what? And I think that's going to be the biggest thing to pay attention to. So I've gone on a bit of a ramble in this video, kind of gone a bit away from the original point of the video, which was talking about a third beta. But I think that it is important to understand where the team is coming from. And really, it is important for me to kind of look and say, what happens when the game drops on October 4th is not nearly as important as what happens when PvE finally drops next year. That is the key to the success of Overwatch 2. If the PvE is good, then that means not getting a third beta and getting limited content at the actual drop of the game on October 4th will matter less, because the PvE will be so good and fun and engaging, and it adds a whole element and aspect to the game. Who cares anymore about the fact that the PvP doesn't include some of these things that are on October 4th didn't have all the really cool stuff, when we know that they put so much time and effort into making this awesome PvE game? If the PvE is not that good, well, then you run into other problems, and you start to kind of ask, how much did you put in to make this terrible PvE, right? Or this lackluster PvE. Like, we waited all this time for what? So that's kind of my reaction to this news. It's really like, it only really matters if the game doesn't deliver on PvE. The October 4th drop, I am telling you all right now, do not go into October 4th expecting the game to feel wildly different from it did this most recent beta. It's going to be very similar. There's going to be obviously UI changes and a new season and stuff with the battle pass and all that type of stuff. And all of that will feel different and unique than what you have with Overwatch 1 as a live game. And that stuff will be different. But don't expect the game to feel fundamentally that much different than it did in the beta. I think it'll be very, very similar. One new hero, one new map, a couple of different things with like seasons, stuff like that will make the game feel different. But I don't think it's going to be monumentally different the way that people expect it to be on October 4th. It's really when PvE drops where we'll see what Overwatch 2 really is, and whether or not the fact that it's taken this long to develop is justified at all. I can guarantee you people are not going to be happy when the game drops no matter what, because that's just the nature of the internet, but I try to be very optimistic and very positive about a number of things. If I see issues, I will call them out, but I also have pretty strong hope that a lot of the things that we view as issues or potential problems are not going to be as big of a deal as we think they will be down the road, though a rocky launch is definitely not something you want to see. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this whole beta news and what it could mean for the future of Overwatch 2. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you agree with me, disagree with me, whatever it is, I'd love to hear from you. But if you want more videos like this in the future, we are less than 2 months away now from Overwatch 2, so get ready for some more Overwatch 2 content as we get closer. And I hope you're all excited and ready for the future as we move into the next era of Overwatch. But that is all from me for today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed, like I said, comment down below, like, subscribe, all that jazz. I'm going to get out of here. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.